government at this point, that there are some important questions about potential political connections to the killing. That, of course, will be one of the items under investigation by the FBI as well in the coming days. That U.S. federal law enforcement agency bringing with it extraordinary experience investigating murders, complex cases like this across the globe. They also have sophisticated tools at their disposal, including some measures that help them trace the origins of guns that are used in crimes like this. Now, the FBI and the other investigators in this case are also, of course, going to be very interested in how the killer was able to get so close to Villavicencio on Wednesday evening as he left that political rally in Quito. We learned some new information today about the security detail that he had with him that evening. According to authorities, there were 2 patrol cars as part of his security detail present outside of that rally. And he also had several police officers following him around, protecting him as his detail. Interestingly, Villavicencio's campaign is said to have had a armored vehicle, but authorities said that the armored vehicle was actually being used in a different city in Ecuador that evening. Michael, the three police officers that were within Villavicencio's detail are among the injured in the shooting. They're said tonight to be in stable condition.
All right, appreciate the update, David Shortell there in Mexico City. Appreciate it.
Thanks.
Now, tough talk coming from leaders in West Africa during a meeting to discuss how to deal with the military coup in Niger. Plus, also still to come, Russian media coverage versus reality on the ground in Ukraine.
Listo at ganado ang baby ko sa vet-approved NutriChoice with active boost and prebiotics na pampalisto. Made with real meat, with essential nutrients to help them grow healthy and happy. Listo ganado sa NutriChoice.
Living in this very idyllic magical world na punong-puno ng kahirapan kasi lahat ng katao mahihirap. Pero magical nga sa dahil ang daming pwede mong gawin sa gubat, sa ilaw. Seeing other universes and other cultures via cinema, it shaped my being in a way. I just thought of cinema as malayang art din, malayang sining.
West African leaders are raising the stakes in their stance against the military junta that took over Niger last month. At a meeting Thursday of the Economic Community of West African States, or ECOWAS, leaders called for the activation and the deployment of a regional standby force to restore order.
Direct the Committee of the Chief of Defense Staff to activate the ECOWAS standby force with all its elements immediately. Order the deployment of the ECOWAS standby force to restore constitutional order in the Republic of Niger.
ECOWAS did not give a timeline, and it's not clear what that force would entail. Several analysts tell CNN that a military intervention in Niger is probably not imminent because it takes time to assemble the ECOWAS forces. The Nigerian president and other ECOWAS leaders have said they prefer to find a diplomatic solution, and use of force would be a last resort. For more, we're joined by Ebenezer Obadati. He's a senior fellow for Africa Studies at the Council on Foreign Relations, and thanks so much for making the time. Let's start with, what do you make of ECOWAS ordering the, quote, activation and deployment of standby forces? I mean, the military option, most people think that would take a long time to actually do, but what do you think the messaging is?
I thought the message was very clear. The message is this: if you don't quit General Jenny, we're going to come in and drag you out. Until about about 2 days ago, if you had asked me, given developments in Nigeria over the last 1 week, given developments across the sub-region, and given the shift in the public mood in Niger itself, if ECOWAS was still going to go ahead with the previous plan for a military invasion to reverse the coup in Niger, if I told me that the ECOWAS announcement will have this kind of muscle, I would have doubted it, but I thought this was pretty significant.
And you have written, and I was reading some of your stuff today, you've written that force is needed. But what are the risks in taking that course of action? The junta, of course, has threatened fierce resistance. Is it a good idea?
I think it's a good idea in principle. So let me explain. You want to send a message that the region is no longer going to have military intervention, period. And that whoever plans to take over a democratically elected government is going to have something to pay. So that's my basic idea. Having said that, given what has happened in Niger over the last few days, given the shift in the mood within Nigeria, given all of those things, I'm not sure about how this is actually going to pan out. I wonder if the defense chiefs, the military chiefs of ECOWAS have the kind of intelligence that I think that's giving them the confidence to make the kind of call that they are making right now.
The junta has reportedly asked for help from the Russian mercenary group Wagner. What are the risks of those potential ties should it come to that? And closer ties with Russia more broadly?
Well, that was always on the cards, and that's one of the problems from the get-go, that given that Wagner was next door already in Mali, in Burkina Faso, and in other parts of the region, the odds were that if this coup were to succeed, that the junta was going to invite Wagner to come in. If this takeover of the government in Niger is not reversed, I think you might as well give up and expect Wagner to move in at some point.
The junta announced a new government on Wednesday. More than half of the 21 positions filled by civilians, the rest military appointments. Is that likely to calm regional concerns?
No. So nothing surprising here for me, at least, because I'm a Nigerian, so I'm very experienced in the language of the military. But here's a way to look at it. 20 civilian appointees under a military government is still a military government. The problem is not with the number of civilian appointees. The problem is that military rule itself is not what you want. It's the very opposite of democratic rule. Those who have taken over power in Niger are borrowing from a set of... They're playing a game that anybody who is familiar with military rule in Africa is very familiar with. So I'm really not impressed. I'm not surprised that they're taking that path, but it just strengthens my own determination that this abomination has to be terminated.
The days and weeks ahead will tell. Ebenezer Obadati, thank you so much. Appreciate your time.
Thank you for having me.
A UN humanitarian official says she is appalled by a Russian strike on a hotel frequently used by the organization, as well as various NGOs in Ukraine. The missile attack happened on Thursday in the city of Zaporizhia. Ukraine says one person was killed, 16 others wounded. The building also serves as a children's day camp, which closed for the day just an hour before the strike. Ukrainian officials called the timing a miracle that likely saved many children's lives. Also in the south, reports of heavy fighting but little movement on the front line as Ukraine tries to push ahead with its counteroffensive. Ukraine has also ordered an evacuation of civilians from the northeastern city of Kupiansk, which is under Russian military pressure. As Ukraine tries to make a breakthrough in its counteroffensive, Russian state media is making its own push on the airwaves. Their take on the Ukrainian offensive is that it's already
Russians say they're taking advantage of Ukraine's flagging counter-offensive. Latest Defense Ministry pictures showing Russian forces advancing on land and in the air. Can't independently verify Russian claims, but officials here insist they're now making daily military gains on the battlefield.
During the day, 7 counterattacks from armed forces of Ukraine were successfully repelled in the Kharkiv region.
On the country's flagship news show, they're already branding Ukraine's counter-offensive a bust. Looping videos of Ukrainian troops in Western-supplied kit getting bogged down, ridiculing what they say are Western excuses for Ukraine's failure. At first, Westerners justified Ukrainian failures with the weather. General Frost, the anchor says. Later it was General Mud, and now it's the turn of General Thistle. The Russian army is now aided by the greenery. This insurmountable obstacle is why the Ukrainian army is failing to push forward, supposedly, she says. In fact, Ukraine says it is making progress, albeit slow, without the weapons it says it desperately needs to overcome heavily defended Russian lines. And it's going on the offense, stepping up drone attacks on Russian shipping and other targets to pressure Moscow and disrupt supply lines. Bringing home Russia's special military operation like never before. We're all shocked that it's happening here, says this woman in Moscow. But we're not politicians, so we don't want to comment, she told local media. I've got 2 kids and want to stop being ashamed. They were born in this time, says another, her face blurred to protect her identity. But on the battlefield, Ukraine's slow progress is fueling Kremlin hopes that a turning point may soon be reached, and that patience with Ukraine in the West may eventually run out. Matthew Chance, CNN Moscow.
Still to come on the program, outrage in China as the government deliberately sends floodwaters into people's homes. We'll have the reason why when we come back.
It's been 2 years since we started the Pasig River Cleanup and Dredging Project. Before that, we were doing the Tuliaan River Cleanup Project in 2020. For Pasig River, Isarang is allocating 2 billion pesos to clean up the river. We are pleased to report that so far for the past 2 years that we have been cleaning up, we have already removed about 1.3 million metric tons of silt and waste in both Pasig River and San Juan River. And we have already covered more than 22 kilometers of the 27 kilometers of Pasig River, and here more than 5.4 kilometers of San Juan River. So our focus was really more on the shallow areas of both the rivers.
Importante yung talaga dredging. Pero mo, 1 meter lang, ilalagyan mo tubig, paano hindi aapaw dito sa lupain? Kaya yun na isang problema. Para napakagaling ang San Miguel sa tulong para sa taong bayan. Last 2 years, medyo mababa na lang, walang gaanong problema.
So, hindi pa nag-dredging dito ang San Miguel, binaba dati. Pero ngayon, wala namang, hindi na masyadong mataas ang tubig, wala na masyado kaming pangamba dito.
Napakaganda na collective effort, we really can solve this problem. Kasi economically, uplift the livelihoods of the poor and the rich para magpantay-pantay ayos lahat para kaginhawa for everyone.
We're almost nearing the completion of the river cleanup here in Pasig River and San Juan River. We are targeting to finish by July or August of this year. Our aim to contribute to the community that San Miguel is able to help in the not only in terms of reducing river pollution, but also to increase the water holding capacity of the river so that we can mitigate flooding in the future.
nagbibigay ng patas na oportunidad para makapagtrabaho pa rin ang senior citizen. Ngayong No Smoking Awareness Month, alamin natin kung paano tuluyang magbukwit. Dadalo si President-elect Bongbong Marcos sa APEC Summit sa Thailand. Jose Luz Gaba, ang newsroom ngayon.
Pasipalipasyon ng online lasher, pwede bang ireklamo mga malipens na toilets?
Pwede na ba ang divorce sa Pilipinas?
Ay naku, kulong ba kung di pagbabayad ng renta?
Fake na titulo ng lupa. O paano yan, attorney? Lahat ng tanongin nyo, masasagot siya sa batas.
Kasama ang law teacher ng bayan na si Attorney Al Agra.
At si Medyo Makapagal, tara pag-usapan natin, batas para sa lahat, dito sa Batas et al.
8 p.m. Dito lang sa CNN Philippines.
You're watching CNN Newsroom. I'm Michael Holmes. Now, authorities in South Korea have evacuated more than 14,000 people in the wake of Tropical Storm Kanun. Officials shut down schools and cancelled hundreds of flights, train routes and ferry crossings due to the heavy rains and flooding. The former typhoon is sweeping through the Korean peninsula after pummeling southern Japan twice. South Korea's Interior Ministry says at least one person has died. Kanun is weakening as it continues over land and into North Korea. According to reports, the military and political ruling party there have been ordered to prepare for flooding and to salvage crops. Northern China also seeing rain from Kanun even as it recovers from Typhoon Doksuri that hit about 2 weeks ago. And in the past couple of hours, China said at least 29 people in Hubei province died because of flooding and heavy rains from Doksuri. Meanwhile, there have been rare protests in China after the government deliberately directed floodwaters towards people's homes in the wake of that typhoon and the record rains that followed. CNN's Ivan Watson with that story.
A rare moment of defiance in China. Angry residents on the steps of a municipal government building in the city of Buzhou. The sign says, "Give me back my home. The flood was caused by floodwater discharge, not by heavy rainfall." At some point, men with police shields dispersed the crowd. The incident took place after deadly floods caused by the heaviest rains to hit northeastern China in 140 years. A typhoon that killed dozens of people in and around the Chinese capital, Beijing, forcing the evacuation of more than 1 million people from their homes. Over the last 2 weeks, these 3 provinces all saw dramatic flooding. But we're learning that some communities weren't just damaged by a natural disaster. The small city of Buzhou, where the protest took place, was deliberately flooded by authorities following a government disaster plan aimed at protecting bigger cities like Beijing and Tianjin. At 2 a.m. on August 1st, authorities activated a flood control plan, releasing water from dams into flood storage and detention zones. They then had to evacuate more than 800,000 people living in those zones, which quickly flooded. Stick TV showed the Communist Party chief of Hebei province touring the disaster area, instructing subordinates to reduce flooding pressure on Beijing and vowing to resolutely be the capital's moat. In the event of a crisis, experts say countries often plan to redirect rising water, but usually towards flood zones that are unpopulated.
Seems like a planning problem. Somebody allowed development or overdevelopment in an area that was designated to be a flood control zone.
Provincial governments thanked evacuees for their sacrifice, adding, "History will record your contribution." That's called comfort to people who've seen their homes and livelihoods destroyed for the greater good.
Nearly all the factories in our area were seriously damaged. 99% of the factories have little hope of salvaging the losses.
Under Chinese rules, people are entitled to compensation of 70% of the value of property submerged in flood control areas. Experts say planning for the next extreme weather disaster will only get harder.
I think the entire world is scrambling to get prepared for the problems climate change is unfolding onto us.
Which seems like an almost impossible challenge. Ivan Watson, CNN, Hong Kong.
The quarterfinals of the Women's World Cup are underway, and the first match of the stage was a thriller. Spain and the Netherlands took their match into extra time. We'll have the highlights in a live report from New Zealand coming up after the break.
Pasado na ang aumento sa sahod ng mga minimum wage earners.
Dagdag pasakit na naman sa mga motorista ang inaasahan. Hiniling ni Pangulong Marcos ang tulong ng Amerika para tugunan ang pagtaas ng presyo ng langis.
Nanawagan ng agarang aksyon ang World Health Organization sa pagkalat ng monkeypox. Dumating na sa Tokyo ang labig ng pinaslang na dating Japan Prime Minister.
Umakit na sa 10 ang bilang ng mga nasabi sa idol na tumama sa Abra.
So many questions about what is the federal government doing? Do you get the anger that is out here? How concerned are you about the front line?
You don't believe that there's a racial divide here? Looking back, as president, did you tell the story of race in America enough, do you think? All the places I've been and all the things I've seen, all the people I've talked to, I carry with me. They're part of what I do right here, holding the powerful accountable, keeping them honest. AC 360, Tuesday through Saturday only on CNN.
For the first time in 47 years, Russia has successfully launched an unmanned spacecraft to the moon. The Luna 25 is expected to enter orbit around Earth before transferring to a lunar orbit and then descending to the surface of the moon. The Luna and an Indian spacecraft that launched last month are both expected to land at the moon's south pole on August 23rd. It's a race to see which country will land first.
5, 3, 2, 1, release, release, release.
And more than a decade after it began selling tickets to space, Virgin Galactic has finally launched its first tourist to the edge of space. The company, founded by British billionaire Richard Branson, launched the VSS Unity from a New Mexico spaceport on Thursday, attached to a massive twin fuselage. The craft carried 3 paying customers on board. Unity traveling more than 80 kilometers above the Earth's surface, the altitude that the US government considers to be the boundary of outer space. The Women's World Cup quarterfinals are underway in New Zealand, and fans couldn't have asked for a more thrilling start to the stage. Spain and the Netherlands taking their match into extra time after a nail-biting 90 minutes plus stoppage. CNN's Amanda Davis is outside the stadium in Auckland, and yeah, I will admit I wasn't working, I was watching it. We are getting to the pointy end, and this was a cracker of a finish to the Spain-Netherlands quarterfinal. Walk us through it.
Yeah, it was brilliant, Michael. A real proper quarter-final matchup, which has seen Spain ultimately into a Women's World Cup semi-final for the first time in their history. Undoubtedly, one of the most talented squads in this tournament, booking their place at the expense, of course, of the 2019 runners-up